The acrid smell of burning xenoplant oil and twisted metal filled Captain Marcus Reid's nostrils as he picked his way through the wreckage of the crashed Zelarian transport vessel. His environmental suit's air recycler worked overtime, filtering out the toxic fumes while his tactical display painted a grim picture of the crash site. The massive ship had carved a mile-long scar through the crimson jungle of Kepler 4 for 2b. Its hull split open like an overripe fruit. "Control, this is Rescue 7. Marcus spoke into his comm unit, his voice steady despite the devastation around him. "I've reached the primary crash site. Hull integrity is compromised, but I'm detecting multiple life signs inside the forward section. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Static crackled through his earpiece before the response came. "Through. Copy that. Rescue 7. Be advised. Initial scans show Zelarian biosignatures. Approach with extreme caution." Marcus paused, his gloved hand tightening on his plasma cutter. The Zelarians were humanity's newest allies in the galactic Confederation, but they were still largely unknown. Feline-like humanoids, with enhanced physical capabilities and fierce territorial instincts. They rarely allowed other species near their young. Finding a Zelarian transport in human space was unusual enough. Finding one crashed on a frontier world raised even more questions. His boots crunched through crystallized debris as he approached the main breach in the hull. The ship's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the twisted corridors, and his suit's sensors detected elevated radiation levels from the damaged fusion core. Whatever had happened here, it had been catastrophic. A sound made him freeze. High-pitched keening that seemed to come from deeper within the ship. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic, desperate. His translator struggled with the alien vocalizations, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. Pain, fear, and something else. Maternal distress. Marcus moved deeper into the wreckage, following the sound through corridors that had been luxury passenger compartments just hours before. His suit's lights illuminated scattered personal belongings, elegant Zelarian clothing, made from what looked like liquid silver, crystalline data storage devices, and toys. Definitely toy small figurines carved from exotic woods that spoke of a culture that valued craftsmanship and beauty. The keening grew louder, more urgent. His tactical display showed two life signs ahead, one strong but weakening, another much smaller and fading fast. Marcus broke into a run, his enhanced muscles carrying him swiftly through the debris-strewn passage. He found them in what had once been a family quarters, now crushed beneath a collapsed bulkhead. A female Zelarian was trapped beneath a massive piece of twisted metal, her golden fur matted with luminescent blue blood. Her amber eyes fixed on his as he entered, and despite her obvious pain, she bared sharp canine teeth in what he recognized as a defensive posture. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But it wasn't herself she was defending. Pinned beneath her, protected by her own body from the crushing weight above, was a small Zelarian child, barely more than a kitten by the looks of it. The cub's breathing was shallow, its tiny chest rising and falling in rapid, panicked movements. "Easy," Marcus said, raising his hands in a universal gesture of peace. His translator worked overtime, converting his words into the melodic tones of the Zelarian language. "I'm here to help." The female's eyes narrowed, evaluating him with predatory intelligence. When she spoke, her voice was melodic despite her pain, with an accent that made the translated words sound like music. "Human, ... My cub, ... Marcus didn't need to hear more. He activated his plasma cutter, the bright blue beam slicing through the metal with surgical precision. The Zelarian watched his every move, her maternal instincts clearly warring with her need to trust this alien stranger. As he worked, Marcus found himself stealing glances at her face. Even injured and trapped, she was striking her features. Sharp and elegant, with high cheekbones and those incredible amber eyes that seemed to see right through him. Almost there, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead inside his helmet. The metal was thicker than he'd expected, and his plasma cutter's power cell was running low. But failure wasn't an option, not with that tiny life hanging in the balance. The final section of debris fell away with a crash, and Marcus immediately moved to assess the injuries. The female, he noticed she wore the intricate braiding patterns that marked her as high-ranking in Zelarian society, had several broken ribs and internal bleeding, but her primary concern was obviously the cub. "My son," she whispered, her voice growing weaker. "Kale, ... Is he?" Marcus gently examined the small Zelarian, noting the similarities to his mother, the same golden fur with darker stripes, same amber eyes, though these were glazed with shock and pain. The cub couldn't have been more than 5 years old in human terms, and he was in bad shape. Internal injuries, possible spinal damage, and his breathing was becoming more labored by the minute. "He needs immediate medical attention," Marcus said, already activating his emergency beacon. "Both of you do." "No time," the female gasped, her hand reaching out to touch her son's face with infinite tenderness. "The core ... radiation. You must take him ... now." Marcus checked his radiation detector and cursed. The levels were climbing rapidly. The ship's fusion core was building toward a catastrophic failure that would irradiate everything within. A mile radius? Even with his environmental suit, he had maybe 10 minutes before the exposure became lethal. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly, scooping up the cub in his arms. The small Zelarian was surprisingly light, his breathing shallow, but steady. "Can you move?" The female tried to rise, managing to get to her knees before collapsing with a cry of pain. "My legs ... I cannot feel them." Marcus's tactical mind quickly calculated their options. His emergency beacon would bring rescue teams, but not for at least 20 minutes. The radiation would kill them both long before then. But his ship was only half a mile away, and his medical bay was equipped for emergency surgery. "Hold on," he said, gently placing the cub in a protective carry position before reaching down to lift the female. She was heavier than her son, but still surprisingly light for her height, her golden fur incredibly soft against his suit's sensors. "You cannot carry us both," she protested weakly, but Marcus was already moving, his enhanced muscles making the task manageable, if not easy. "Watch me," he replied, breaking into a steady jog toward the breach in the hull. His suit's radiation detector was climbing into the orange zone, but he ignored it. Behind them, the Zelarian transport's hull was beginning to glow with an ominous inner light. The jungle outside was no better Raelian plants, twisted into impossible shapes by the ship's crash, their bioluminescent pods casting eerie patterns of light through the crimson mist. Marcus's ship, the Wanderer, sat in a clearing 200 meters away, its boarding ramp already extended in response to his emergency beacon. Almost there, he panted, feeling the female's grip tighten on his shoulders. The cub in his other arms stirred slightly, amber eyes opening to look at him with innocent trust that made his heart clench. They reached the ship just as Marcus's radiation detector hit the red zone. Behind them, the Zelarian transport erupted in a pillar of superheated plasma that turned the night sky white. The shockwave knocked Marcus off his feet, and he twisted desperately to shield both Zelarians with his body as they hit the ship's deck. "Medical bay now," he gasped to his ship's AI, struggling to his feet. "Emergency protocols, xenobiology settings for Zelarian physiology." "Acknowledged, Captain," the smooth voice of his ship's computer responded. "Medical bay is prepped and ready." The next hour was a blur of medical procedures that pushed both Marcus and his ship's automated systems to their limits. The female Zelarian, who had introduced herself as Lyra, matriarch of the Moonshade clan, had severe internal injuries that required emergency surgery. Her son Kale was in even worse condition, his small body fighting for every breath. Marcus found himself working alongside the medical AI, his hands steady despite his lack of formal medical training. Military experience had taught him battlefield medicine, and the ship's systems guided him through the more complex procedures. What surprised him was how naturally he seemed to understand Zelarian physiology, his hands finding the right pressure, points to ease pain, the correct angles for placement. "Remarkable," Lyra whispered during a brief moment of consciousness. You work with Zelarian biology as if you were born to it. Marcus looked up from where he was monitoring Kale's vital signs. Cub was stable now, his breathing even, and deep in what the medical computers assured him was natural Zelarian healing sleep. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, Lyra said, her amber eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. It is more than that. You carry the scent of a natural healer, a protector of cubs. It is ... very rare among your species. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that, so he focused on adjusting the medical monitors. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Something that went beyond a simple rescue mission. Hours later, both Zelarians were stable and sleeping peacefully in the medical bay's recovery pods. Marcus sat in the adjoining observation lounge, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him exhausted but oddly satisfied. He'd saved them, both of them, Captain Reid. His ship's AI interrupted his thoughts. I'm receiving a priority transmission from Zelarian Command. They're requesting immediate communication. Marcus straightened, put it through. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the image of an elderly Zelarian male with silver-streaked fur and ceremonial scarring on his cheeks. His amber eyes held the weight of authority and age. Captain Reid, the figure said, his voice carrying across the light years with crystal clarity. I am Elder Thane of the High Council. We have received word of your actions regarding Matriarch Lyra and her cub. Just doing my job, Elder, Marcus replied carefully. Any human would have done the same. No, Thane said, his tone carrying finality. Any human would not have succeeded. Our medical data shows that young Kale should have died from his injuries. The fact that he lives, that he heals, speaks of intervention beyond mere medical skill. Felt a chill run down his spine. I don't understand. You will, Thane said cryptically. Matriarch Lyra has invoked the debt of life and ancient law that binds her to you until the debt is repaid. But more than that. ... quotes. He paused, studying Marcus with those ancient eyes. She has declared you Ketharakub Saver among our people. This is not just a title. It is a bond that cannot be broken. What does that mean exactly? Marcus asked, though he suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. It means, Captain Reid, that your life has just become very complicated. Matriarch Lyra is not just any Zelarian. She is royalty, the heir to one of our most powerful clans. According to our oldest laws, a Kithara, who saves the cub of Anne, unmated matriarch has the right to claim her as mate. Marcus's coffee cup slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the deck. Sorry, what? More importantly, Thane continued, ignoring Marcus's shock, she has the right to claim you. From what our medical scanners detected during the rescue, he smiled, showing sharp canine teeth. She already has. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with his spinning thoughts and the sound of his own thundering heartbeat. In the medical bay, he could see Lyra stirring in her recovery pod, those amber eyes opening and immediately seeking him out. When their gazes met through the transparent aluminum, she smiled an expression of fierce satisfaction that made his breath catch. He was beginning to understand that rescuing her cub had been the easy part. What came next was going to challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, about alien cultures, and about the growing warmth in his chest every time. He looked at the golden-furred matriarch who had somehow claimed him as her own, as if, summoned by his thoughts, Lyra's voice came through the medical bay's intercom. Weak but determined. Marcus Reid, Cathara of my heart. We need to talk. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His quiet life as a freelance rescue pilot had just become infinitely more complicated. As he looked at the sleeping Covkale, who was alive because of what they'd done together, he found he didn't regret a single moment of it. The real adventure, he suspected, was just beginning. Marcus stood in the doorway of the medical bay, watching Lyra carefully extract herself from the recovery pod with fluid grace that belied her recent injuries. Her golden fur had regained its lustrous sheen, and the deep amber of her eyes seemed to glow with renewed vitality. The Zelarian healing factor was remarkable, what would have taken a human weeks to recover from. She had overcome in mere hours. Your Medical systems are quite sophisticated, she said, stretching with feline elegance, though they lack the spiritual components our own healers would use. Spiritual components? Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite his nervousness about their impending conversation. Healing is not just physical for our people, Lyra explained. Moving to check on Kale, the cub was still sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. It involves the bonding of life forces, the sharing of strength between healer and patient. You... She turned to study Marcus with those penetrating eyes. You did this instinctively, without training, without understanding what you were doing. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I just did what felt right. Exactly. Lyra moved closer, and Marcus caught her scent something like warm amber and exotic spices that made his pulse quicken. Among my people, such natural ability is considered a gift from the first mothers. It marks you as someone special, someone chosen. Chosen for what? Though Marcus suspected he already knew the answer. Lyra's smile was predatory and gentle at the same time, to be worthy of a matriarch's bond. The ship's intercom crackled to life, saving Marcus from having to respond immediately. Captain, we have an incoming vessel, his AI announced. Zelarian configuration, requesting permission to dock. Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances. That would be my escort, she said matter-of-factly. I sent a coded message when I awakened, informing them of our situation. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The formal claiming ceremony must be witnessed, Lyra said, as if this were obvious, and there are certain negotiations that must take place. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in his ship's main cargo bay, which had been hastily converted into a meeting space. The Zelarian delegation that had boarded was impressive and intimidating in equal measure. 3 females in ornate, ceremonial armor flanked a 4th figure who commanded immediate attention. She was ancient by any species standards. Her fur silver-white with age, but her amber eyes burned with fierce intelligence. Ritual scarring covered her arms and face in intricate patterns that spoke of countless victories and honors. When she moved, it was with the deadly grace of a predator, despite her apparent age. Captain Reid, the elder said, her voice carrying absolute authority. I am High Matriarch Zara, grandmother to Lyra and great-grandmother to young Kale. I have come to oversee the claiming. Marcus looked helplessly at Lyra, who was now dressed in flowing robes that her escorts had brought. I still don't completely understand what's happening here. Then allow me to explain, Zara said, settling onto a cushion that one of her attendants had placed on the deck. Among our people, the bond between a cub saver and the mother is sacred. It dates back to our earliest traditions, when survival depended on the protection of our young by the strongest and most capable adults. She gestured for Marcus and Lyra to sit across from her. Marcus felt awkward on the alien cushions, but Lyra settled beside him with natural grace, close enough that her warmth radiated against his side. The law of Cathara is absolute, Zara continued. When an unmated matriarch's cub is saved by another, that savior becomes bonded to both mother and child. It is not merely romantic, it is spiritual, genetic, evolutionary. But I'm human, Marcus protested. Surely there are compatibility issues, are there? Zara's eyes glittered with amusement. Tell me, Captain, what did you feel when you first touched my great-grandson? Marcus frowned, remembering. There was something. Like a connection. I knew exactly where his injuries were, what he needed. When you carried Lyra, memory was vivid, her weight in his arms, the way his body had automatically adjusted to protect her. Strange sense of rightness he'd felt. Similar. Like I'd been carrying her my whole life. Fascinating, Zara murmured. Lyra, show him your wrist. Lyra extended her arm, pushing back the sleeve of her robe. Marcus gasped. On the golden fur of her inner wrist, a pattern had appeared intricate. Spirals in a darker gold that seemed to shift and move in the light. Bonding marks, Lyra said softly. They appear when a Zelarian finds their true mate, but Marcus... She reached for his hand. Show them your arm. With growing amazement, Marcus rolled up his sleeve. There, on his own wrist, was a pattern that perfectly mirrored Lyra's, though on his human skin, it appeared as a subtle tattoo-like marking in deep gold. Impossible, one of the escort warriors whispered. Not impossible, Zara corrected, her voice filled with wonder. Unprecedented. Yes, but not impossible. The first mothers spoke of this in the oldest prophecies, that when our people found the stars, we would discover those meant to join with us among the starfarers. Marcus stared at his wrist, then at Lyra's matching mark. What does this mean? Means, Lyra said, her voice soft with emotion, that what I felt was correct. You are my Thakuramai, destined mate. The bond formed the moment you touched Kale, cemented when you risked your life to save us both. But what about choice? Marcus asked, looking around at the assembled Zelarians. What if I don't want this bond? The cargo bay fell silent. Expression grew serious. The bond cannot be forced, Captain Reid. It can only form between willing spirits. The fact that the marks appeared means your soul chose mine granddaughter, even if your mind has not yet accepted it. Marcus felt Lyra's tension beside him and realized his words had hurt her. He turned to study her profile, the elegant curve of her neck. The way her golden fur caught the light, the maternal love in her eyes when she looked toward the medical bay, where Kale slept. I didn't say I didn't want it, he said quietly. I just ... This is a lot to process. Yesterday, I was a freelance rescue pilot. Today, I'm apparently destined to be the mate of an alien princess. Matriarch, Lyra corrected, a small smile playing at her lips. And you're not just any rescue pilot, Marcus Reid. You're the human who dove into a radiation zone to save strangers, who performed medical procedures that should have been impossible, who carries the marks of destiny on his skin. Escort warriors stepped forward. Hi, Matriarch. There is the matter of the trials. Zara nodded gravely. Yes, Captain Reid, while the bond is formed naturally. Our laws require that you prove yourself worthy of a matriarch through the traditional trials of worth. What kind of trials? Marcus asked, though he suspected they wouldn't be pleasant. Combat. Prowess, wisdom, and devotion to the cub, Zara listed. These 3 pillars support all Zelarian mateships. You must demonstrate mastery of each. The combat trial is straightforward, Lyra explained. You must defeat 3 of our warriors in single combat. The wisdom trial involves solving a complex puzzle that tests strategic thinking and cultural understanding. And the devotion trial. She paused, her expression growing tender. You must bond with Kale, prove that you can love and protect him as your own son. Marcus looked toward the medical bay, thinking of the small, golden-furred child who had looked at him with such trust. The last one doesn't sound like a trial at all, spoken like a true Thakara, Zara said approvingly. But do not underestimate the others. Our warriors are formidable, and the wisdom trial has defeated many promising candidates. When do these trials take place? Marcus asked. Traditionally, immediately, Lyra said. But given the unusual circumstances and the fact that you are an alien species, she looked to her grandmother. One day to prepare, Zara decided. Captain Reid, you may use this time to learn our ways, to train with our weapons, to understand what you are undertaking. As the formal meeting dispersed, Marcus found himself alone with Lyra in the ship's observation lounge. The stars wheeled slowly past the viewport, and the silence between them was charged with possibility and uncertainty. You're afraid, Lyra observed, settling beside him on the couch with that fluid grace. Terrified, Marcus admitted. Not of the trials. I've faced worse odds. But of this. He gestured between them. Of feeling something this intense for someone I've known for less than a day. Lyra was quiet for a moment, then reached out to touch his hand. The contact sent warmth shooting up his arm. In Zelarian culture, we believe that the heart knows truth before the mind does. I felt the bond form the moment you lifted Kale from that wreckage. Everything since then has simply been confirmation. And if I fail the trials, her amber eyes flashed, you won't. I've seen your heart, Marcus Reid. I've felt your strength. Your compassion, your instinctive protection of the innocent. You are already everything a matriarch could want in a mate. But what about what you want? Marcus asked, turning to face her fully. Not as a matriarch following ancient laws, but as Lyra? As a woman? The question seemed to surprise her. Among my people, personal desire and duty are rarely separate. We are raised to want what is best for our clan, our cubs. She paused, studying his face. But you're asking something different, aren't you? I'm asking if you could love me, Marcus said simply, not because of destiny or bonding marks or ancient laws, but because of who I am. Lyra was silent for so long that Marcus began to think he'd overstepped. Then she reached up to cup his face with her hand, her fur soft against his skin. I have watched you work to save my son with hands that shook from exhaustion but never wavered. I have felt you risk your life for strangers without thought of reward. I have seen you show kindness to a child, not your own species, tenderness to a female you had no reason to trust. Her thumb traced along his cheekbone. How could I not love such a man? When she kissed him, it was soft and careful, an exploration, rather than a claim. Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him, like a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing suddenly clicking into place. Her lips were warm, and she tasted like honey and starlight. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Marcus saw his own wonder reflected in her amber eyes. The trials, she whispered against his lips. You must succeed, not for honor or law, but because I cannot bear the thought of losing you now that I've found you. I will, Marcus promised, meaning it more deeply than any oath he'd ever sworn. For you, for Kale, for us. A small sound from the doorway made them turn. Kale stood there, still wearing the medical gown from the bay, his amber eyes wide as he took in the scene. For a moment, Marcus tensed, unsure how the cub would react to seeing his mother with an alien stranger. Then Kale padded forward on silent feet and climbed onto the couch between them. Curling up against Marcus's side with perfect trust. He accepts. You, Lyra breathed, wonder in her voice. Cubs always know. Their instincts are pure. Marcus looked down at the small, warm weight against his ribs, a Kale's peaceful expression as he dozed between his mother and the human who had saved his life. Something fierce and protective rose in his chest, feeling so strong it almost overwhelmed him. My son, he whispered, the words feeling right in a way that defied explanation. Our son, Lyra corrected, her hand coming to rest on both Marcus and Kale. Whatever the trials bring, that truth remains. As the three of them sat together watching the stars wheel past, Marcus felt the last of his doubts fade away. Tomorrow would bring combat, tests of wit and will, and challenges he could barely imagine. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged. The bond between them hummed with contentment. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus could swear he heard the echo of ancient voices singing songs of destiny fulfilled. Dawn on Kepler, for 4 to be, painted the sky in shades of amber and rose that reminded Marcus of Lyra's eyes. He stood in the makeshift arena that the Zelarian warriors had constructed overnight, testing the weight of the traditional combat blade they'd given him. The weapon was elegant, curved like a claw, and perfectly balanced with a grip designed for hands larger than human norm, felt alien in his grasp, yet somehow familiar. The blade was forged by our greatest weaponsmith, Lyra said from beside the arena's edge, where she sat with Kale in her lap. The cub was wide awake and fascinated by the proceedings, his amber eyes tracking every movement his potential knew. Father made it has tasted victory in 100 duels. Marcus swung the blade experimentally, feeling how it cut through the air. Any advice on Zelarian fighting styles? They rely on speed and agility over brute strength, Lyra replied. But you have advantages they don't expect. Your reach is longer, and your species fights differently than ours. Use that. High Matriarch Zara stepped into the center of the arena, her ancient voice carrying easily in the morning air.
Captain?
Reid, you face the trial of combat. You must defeat 3 warriors in single combat to prove your worthiness, to protect a matriarch and her cub. There is no shame in yielding, but failure means the bond cannot be completed. Marcus nodded, rolling his shoulders to loosen tight muscles. He'd spent the night learning what he could about Zelarian martial arts from Lyra's escorts. But theory was very different from practice. Your first opponent, Zara announced, gesturing to a lean Zelarian male who prowled into the arena with predatory grace. Vex of the Night Hunter clan, master of the twin blade style. Vex was impressive muscles like coiled steel beneath his. Dark striped fur, twin curved blades that seemed to dance in his hands. He studied Marcus with calculating yellow eyes, looking for weaknesses. I mean, no disrespect, human, Vex said as they circled each other. But you are not Zelarian. This bond should not be possible. Yet here we are, Marcus replied, settling into a defensive stance. He'd learned long ago that in unfamiliar combat situations, it was better to let the opponent make the first move. Vex struck like lightning, both blades weaving complex patterns that would have shredded a normal human in seconds. But Marcus's military training kicked in, and he found himself moving with fluid efficiency, his single blade deflecting the twin attacks while he studied his opponent's rhythm. The Zelarian was fast. Faster than any human Marcus had ever fought. But he was also predictable, following classical forms that prioritized elegance over effectiveness. When Vex overextended on a particularly elaborate thrust, Marcus stepped inside his guard and drove an elbow into the warrior's solar plexus. Doubled over, gasping, and Marcus's blade found his throat. Yield, Marcus said quietly. Vex's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with respect. I yield to the Cathara. A murmur ran through the watching Zelarians. Marcus heard Kale's excited chittering and felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with combat adrenaline. Your second opponent, Zara announced as Vex withdrew with dignity intact. Senna of the Stormclaw clan, master of the heavy blade. This warrior was different, a female built like a mountain, with silver fur and scars that spoke of countless battles. Her weapon was massive, a two-handed sword that seemed designed to cleave opponents in half. So I'll be on a ribbon a brighter I've been winner in a bader in ribbon I wear ever and rubber when further and the run for inexorable force of an avalanche. I have fought beside humans in the border wars, Senna said, settling into a wide stance. You are tough, but brittle. One solid hit, and you break. She attacked without preamble, her massive blade whistling through the air with enough force to cut Marcus in half if it connected. But he was already moving, using his longer reach to stay outside her optimal range while looking for an opening. The fight became a deadly dance, Xena's overwhelming power against Marcus's mobility and tactical thinking. She was relentless, each swing of her blade forcing him to give ground, but Marcus began to see the pattern. Heavy weapon fighters always had the same weakness: recovery time. When Senna committed to a massive overhead strike that would have split him from crown to groin, Marcus sidestepped and moved inside her guard. His blade found the gap between her armor plates, the point resting against her heart. Yield, he said, breathing hard. Xena looked down at the blade, then up at Marcus's face. Slowly, she smiled an expression of genuine approval. I yield to the Kithara. You fight like a true warrior. The third opponent made Marcus's blood run cold. She was young, barely more than an adolescent by Zelarian standards. But she moved with a deadly grace that spoke of training from birth. Her weapons were energy claws, technological extensions of her natural claws that could cut through almost anything. Kira of the Moonshade clan, Zara announced, and Marcus heard the pride in the elder's voice. My youngest granddaughter, and our most promising warrior, Lyra's sister. That added a personal dimension to the fight that made Marcus even more nervous. If he hurt her, would Lyra ever forgive him? But if he held back, would he fail the trial? Uncle? Marcus, Kira said with a predatory grin that was hauntingly familiar. Let's see if you're worthy of my sister. She attacked with blinding speed, her energy claws leaving trails of light in the air. Unlike the previous opponents, Kira fought with no formal style. She was pure instinct and lethality, adapting her attacks to exploit every opening Marcus gave her. The fight pushed Marcus to his absolute limits. Kira was faster than him, stronger than him, and her weapons could cut through his blade if she landed a solid hit. But she was also young, and youth brought impatience. When she overcommitted to a spectacular leaping attack, Marcus did something she didn't expect. He threw his blade aside and tackled her in midair. They hit the ground hard, Marcus using his weight advantage to pin her while her energy claws sparked harmlessly against the arena's shielded floor. "I yield," he said, though he was careful to keep his voice respectful. Kira struggled for a moment, then relaxed with a laugh. "I yield, uncle," though that was hardly traditional combat. "Sometimes tradition needs to adapt," Marcus replied, helping her to her feet. Zara stepped forward, her ancient eyes bright with approval. "The trial of combat is complete. Captain Reid has proven his worthiness to defend a matriarch and her cub." The watching Zelarians erupted in cheers, and Marcus felt a surge of pride that was echoed through his bond with Lyra. From across the arena,
"Ow."
She smiled at him with such warmth that his knees nearly buckled, but there was no time to rest. Trial of wisdom began immediately. The puzzle chamber was a wonder of Zelarian engineering, a spherical room filled with floating holographic symbols that shifted and moved in response to touch. The walls showed star charts, mathematical equations, and cultural iconography from dozens of worlds. "This is the labyrinth of understanding," Zara explained, as Marcus studied the bewildering array of information. "It tests not just intelligence, but wisdom, the ability to see connections between disparate elements and understand their deeper meaning." Marcus circled the room, trying to make sense of the seemingly random symbols. There were Zelarian breeding charts, human military formations, trade routes between allied worlds, even what looked like genetic sequences. How was he supposed to find meaning in this chaos? The scenario, Zara continued, is as follows. A plague has struck the neutral zone, affecting both human and Zelarian colonies. Traditional treatments have failed. You must identify the source of the plague and propose a solution, using only the information in this chamber. Marcus felt a chill. Yes, this wasn't just an abstract puzzle, it was the kind of real-world crisis that could destroy both their species if mishandled. He began studying the data more carefully, looking for patterns. The plague symptoms were subtle: decreased fertility, increased aggression, breakdown of social bonds. It affected humans and Zelarians differently, but with similar end results. The affected colonies were all in a specific region of space, near systems that had been recently surveyed for colonization. Then Marcus noticed something odd. The trade routes showed shipments of a rare mineral called thrinium from those same systems. Thrinium was used in advanced medical treatments and was considered completely safe. But when Marcus cross-referenced the shipping manifest with the plague outbreaks, ... "It's not a plague," he said suddenly. "It's poisoning. Thrinium deposits from those systems are contaminated with something that affects neural chemistry. The shipping routes explain the spread pattern." Zara raised an eyebrow. "In your proposed solution?" Marcus manipulated the holographic displays, showing his work. "Stop all thrinium shipments from the affected systems immediately. Then ... He paused, seeing a connection that made him smile. "Use the genetic data here to develop a treatment that works for both species. The bonding process that affects Zelarian mating parasite involves neural chemistry changes similar to what we're seeing, but beneficial ones. If we can replicate that process artificially, you would use our most sacred biological process as the basis for medical treatment." One of the watching elders asked, sounding scandalized. "Would use the best tool available to save lives." Marcus replied firmly, "Both human and Zelarian. Isn't that what true understanding means? Finding ways for our species to help each other?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The trial of wisdom is complete. Captain Reid has demonstrated not just intelligence, but the kind of thinking that bridges worlds. 2 trials down. 1 to go. The trial of devotion took place. In a simple room with no weapons, no puzzles, just Marcus and Cale, Lyra watched from behind a one-way barrier. Her presence a warm constant in Marcus's awareness through their bond. This trial cannot be forced or faked, Zara explained. Either the bond between cub and potential father exists, or it does not. Cale will decide. The cub padded into the room with typical feline curiosity, his amber eyes bright as he studied Marcus. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, human and young Zelarian, separated by species but connected by something deeper. Then Cale did something unexpected. He began to speak, his young voice struggling with the human words his translator provided. "Are you my new papa?" he asked with the devastating directness of childhood. Marcus knelt down to be at eye level with the cub. "Would you like me to be?" Cale considered this with the seriousness that only children could bring to important questions. "Papa would protect me?" "Always," Marcus said without hesitation. "Papa would play with me?" "Every day." "Papa would love Mama." Marcus felt his heart clench. At the trust in those amber eyes. "More than my own life?" Cale nodded as if this was exactly what he'd expected to hear. Then he padded forward and climbed into Marcus's lap, curling up with the same trust he'd shown the night before. "I like this, Papa," Cale announced to the room. "He smells like safe." Through their bond, Marcus felt Lyra's overwhelming joy and love. The trial was over, but more than that, something fundamental had shifted. Cale wasn't just accepting him. The cub was claiming him as family. Zara entered the room, her ancient face soft with emotion. "The trials of worth are complete. Captain Marcus Reid, you have proven yourself worthy in combat, wisdom, and devotion. By the ancient laws of our people, you are now recognized as the bonded mate of matriarch Lyra and the adopted father of her cub." The formal words should have felt momentous, but all Marcus could focus on was the warm weight of Cale, his arms and the love flowing through his bond with Lyra. When the barriers came down and she rushed to embrace them both, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never known he was searching for. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, holding his new family close. "Now," Lyra said with a smile that outshone the alien sun, "we begin our life together, all 3 of us," as if summoned. By her words, Cale looked up at them both with solemn amber eyes. "Can we have adventure, Papa? Like in the stories?" Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances, both thinking of the vast galaxy around them, full of dangers and wonders they could face together. "I think," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to Lyra's forehead and ruffling Cale's golden fur, "that our biggest adventure is just beginning." 6 months after the trials, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the Unity's Dawn, watching the swirling nebula of the Zelarian home system paint space in brilliant purples and golds. The ship, their ship now was, a marvel of combined human and Zelarian engineering, designed specifically for their unique family's needs. Behind him, he could hear Lyra's melodic voice as she taught Cale the ancient songs of their people. Mixing them seamlessly with human lullabies Marcus had shared. "Papa, look." Cale's excited voice drew Marcus's attention to the central viewport. The cub had grown considerably in the months since their bonding, his golden fur now showing the darker stripes that marked him as entering adolescence. More importantly, his bond with Marcus had deepened into something that transcended species, a father-son connection that amazed the Zelarian elders and confused human xenobiologists in equal measure. "What do you see, little star?" Marcus asked, using the pet name that had evolved naturally between them. "Ships." Cale pressed his face to the transparisteel, his amber eyes wide with excitement. "Lots and lots of ships." Marcus followed his gaze and felt his breath catch. The Zelarian fleet was magnificent, dozens of vessels with the flowing organic lines characteristic of their technology, each one glowing with internal bioluminescence that made them look like living creatures swimming through space. "The homecoming fleet," Lyra said, moving to stand beside Marcus. Even after all these months, her presence still sent warmth coursing through their bond. "They've come to welcome us to Zelarian Prime, all of them," Marcus asked, awed by the scale. "Of the escort, you're not just any mated pair," Lyra reminded him with amusement, coloring her mental touch. "You're the first successful human Zelarian bonding in recorded history, and I'm still heir to the Moonshade clan." Their approach to Zelarian Prime was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The planet itself was a jewel-covered in vast forests that shifted color with the seasons, crystalline cities that grew from the landscape like natural formations, and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. But it was the welcome that truly overwhelmed him. Thousands of Zelarians had gathered at the primary spaceport, their fur patterns representing dozens of clans and territories. As Marcus, Lyra, and Kale descended the ship's ramp, the crowd erupted. In a harmonious song that seemed to resonate in his bones, "They're singing the song of new bonds," Lyra explained, tears of joy glistening in her amber eyes. It hasn't been performed in over a century. High Matriarch Zara waited at the bottom of the ramp, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a figure. That made Marcus's enhanced hearing pick up Lyra's sharp intake of breath and elderly. Zelarian male with fur gone white with age and eyes that held the weight of absolute authority. "Father," Lyra whispered. Marcus felt her nervous energy through their bond and squeezed her hand reassuringly. Patriarch Theron of the Moonshade clan was legendary, even among humans, a warrior philosopher who had led his people through 3 major wars and countless diplomatic crises. Meeting his daughter's alien mate was probably not high on his list of preferred activities. "Daughter," Theron said as they approached, his voice carrying the formal tones of ceremony. "You have chosen unusually." "I have chosen well," Lyra replied, lifting her chin with familiar stubbornness. "The bonds do not lie, Father." Theron's ancient eyes turned to Marcus, studying him with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "So you are the human who saved my grandson and stole my daughter's heart." "I prefer to think I earned both, sir," Marcus replied respectfully, but firmly. A long moment of silence stretched between them, while thousands of Zelarians watched. Then, to Marcus's shock, Theron began to laugh, a rich, rolling sound that spoke of genuine amusement. "Earned. Yes," the Patriarch agreed, "and defended admirably, from what my spies tell me. The combat trials were ... enlightening." "Grandfather." Kale broke free from Marcus's hand and launched himself at Theron with the fearless enthusiasm of youth. The ancient patriarch caught him effortlessly, his stern expression melting into pure grandfatherly affection. "Little warrior," Theron rumbled, nuzzling Kale's fur. "You have grown strong since your ordeal." "Papa made me strong," Kale announced proudly. "He teaches me human fighting and Zelarian hunting and how to fix ships." Theron's eyebrows rose as he looked at Marcus with new interest. "Does he indeed? And what does Papa teach you about honor?" "That honor comes from protecting family," Kale recited solemnly. "Even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when it means fighting bigger people." "Wise words," Theron mused, settling Kale on his shoulder before extending a hand to Marcus. "Welcome to Zelarian Prime, my new son. Try not to cause too much of a revolution." The formal ceremonies that followed were a blur of ancient rituals and modern adaptations. Marcus found himself participating in bonding rites that dated back millennia, adapted on the fly to accommodate his human physiology. The most moving moment came when he and Lyra underwent the ceremony of Unified Heartsa, ritual that involves sharing memories through their enhanced bond while the entire clan witnessed. Through Lyra's eyes, Marcus experienced her childhood. On Zelarian Prime, her training as a warrior diplomat, her rise to matriarch status, and the loneliness she'd hidden behind duty and responsibility. In return, she saw his military service, his years as a solitary rescue pilot, and the hollow ache he'd carried for a family he'd never thought he'd have. When their memories merged completely for a brief, transcendent moment, there wasn't a dry eye among the watching Zelarians. Even Patriarch Theron had to wipe his eyes, though he tried to hide it behind his ceremonial mask. "The bond is true," High Matriarch Zara announced to the assembled crowd. "What was joined in crisis is now blessed in peace." But all witnessed that. The Moonshade clan has gained not just a son, but a bridge between worlds. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and nights. Marcus found himself swept into a whirlwind of meetings with clan elders, demonstrations of human technology, and increasingly elaborate toasts to the star-crossed mates. That left him grateful for his enhanced human liver. But the moment that mattered most came on the final night. When he found himself alone with his family in the private gardens of the Moonshade estate, Kale had finally exhausted himself and was curled up between them on a moss-covered bench, purring softly in his sleep. "You regret it?" Ira asked quietly, her head resting on Marcus's shoulder as they watched the twin moons rise over the crystal spires of the capital. "Giving up your old life for this?" Marcus considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, he'd been a solitary man with no ties, no commitments beyond his next rescue contract. Now he was bonded for life to an alien princess, stepfather too, a young Zelarian who called him Papa, and somehow responsible for representing all of humanity in an unprecedented interspecies alliance. "The only thing I regret," he said finally, "is that it took a crash landing to find you." Through their bond, he felt Lyra's smile before he saw it. "Perhaps the First Mothers arranged that crash," she said teasingly. "They are known for their sense of drama." "Speaking of drama," Marcus said, pulling a small device from his pocket, "I have something for you." Lyra sat up, her eyes widening as she recognized the object. It was a human engagement ring, a simple band of platinum and diamonds that had belonged to Marcus's grandmother. But it had been modified by Zelarian craftsmen, incorporating threads of bioluminescent crystal that pulsed in rhythm with their shared heartbeat. "Marcus," she whispered, tears starting in her amber eyes. "I know we're already bonded," Marcus said, sliding the ring onto her finger where it settled next to the traditional Zelarian mating bracelet. "But I wanted to give you something from my culture too. A symbol that this isn't just about ancient laws or destiny, it's about choice. My choice to love you every day for the rest of our lives." Lyra's response was to kiss him with a passion that sent sparks through their bond and woke Kale, who grumbled sleepily about mushy grown-up stuff, for curling up tighter between them. As they sat together under alien stars, Marcus felt a deep sense of completion. The lonely rescue pilot was gone, replaced by a man who had found his place in the universe through the simple act of saving a life. Their bond hummed with contentment, and in the distance, he could hear the night songs of Zelarian Prime welcoming him home. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, echoing his question from months before. Now Lyra said, her mental touch warm with love. "In anticipation, we get to find out what happens when a human, a Zelarian, and their cub explore the galaxy together." "Adventure," Kale mumbled from between them, not quite awake, but somehow following the conversation. "The best kind of adventure," Marcus agreed, pulling his family closer. "The kind that never ends." Above them the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, other rescue ships continued their lonely patrols. Other lives waited to be saved. Other destinies waited to unfold. But for Marcus Reid, former solitary pilot and current patriarch of an impossible family, the only destination that mattered was wherever Lyra and Kale were. The bond between them pulsed with shared joy. Marcus realized that sometimes the greatest rescue wasn't saving someone else's life. It was allowing them to save yours in return. As the twin moons set over Zelarian Prime and the first hints of dawn painted the sky in familiar amber hues, Marcus made a silent promise to whatever forces had brought them together. He would spend the rest of his life being worthy of the trust a dying mother had placed in him, worthy of the love that had grown from that moment of desperate courage, and worthy of the cub who had claimed him as Papa with the simple, devastating faith of childhood. Their story had begun with a crash landing and a cry for help. It would continue among the stars, with love as their compass and adventure as their destination. And if the legends were true, if the First Mothers really did guide the hearts of the worthy, then this was only the beginning of something magnificent. The galaxy was vast. It's full of wonders and dangers and endless possibilities. But Marcus Reid had everything he needed to face it: a warrior princess who loved him, a cub who trusted him, and a bond that would last for all the stars in the sky. It was, reflected, as sleep finally claimed him in the gardens of an alien world, more than enough. Epilogue: 5 years later, The rescue beacon cut through the static of deep space with desperate urgency. And Captain Marcus Reid felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had defined his career. Beside him, in the pilot seat of the Unity's Dawn 2, Matriarch Lyra checked their heading with the professional efficiency that had made their rescue service legendary across 3 sectors. Distressed vessel bearing Mark 7, she reported, her fingers dancing over controls that seamlessly blended human and Zelarian technology. Single life sign critically weak. On it, Marcus replied, already adjusting their approach vector. Through their bond, he felt Lyra's approval at his split-second decision-making, just as she felt his admiration for her tactical precision, from the navigation station behind them. 10-year-old Kale looked up from his homework or complex mathematical proof that would have challenged most adult humans. Is it another rescue, Papa? Looks like it. Little star, Marcus confirmed. Want to help? Kale's amber eyes lit up with the same fierce joy his mother showed when facing a challenge. In the 5 years since their bonding, he had grown into a remarkable young being equally at home with human technology and Zelarian traditions. Equally comfortable in the corridors of diplomatic stations and the wilds of unexplored worlds. If your mother approves, Marcus said, grinning at Lyra's mock-stern expression. Educational experience, she decided, but you follow all safety protocols. As their ship approached the distressed vessel, small exploration craft of unknown design, Marcus felt a familiar sense of rightness. This was what they were meant to do. Save lives, bridge cultures, explore the impossible. The Reid Moonshade Rescue Service had become known throughout the galaxy for taking on cases others wouldn't touch, for finding solutions that shouldn't exist. Unknown vessel. This is the Unity's Dawn. Lyra broadcast on all frequencies. We're here to help. The response was weak, but filled with hope. Thank the stars. I thought I was going to die out here. Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances, their bond carrying the same thought. Another life to save. Another chance to prove that the impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. As they began their rescue approach, Kale chattering excitedly about the scanner readings while his parents worked with the seamless coordination of true partners. Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that first desperate rescue. On Kepler-44b, he had found his family in the wreckage of a crashed ship, maybe somewhere in the void ahead. Another family was waiting to be born from an act of courage and compassion. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders. But Marcus Reid faced it with everything he needed: love, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that sometimes the greatest adventures began with a simple decision to help a stranger in need. Their bond hummed with shared anticipation as they closed in on their newest rescue. And in the back of his mind, Marcus could swear he heard the echo of ancient voices singing songs of destiny fulfilled, and new stories just beginning. The end, up next. You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.